Thank you, Speaker. I rise to also make a contribution on behalf of the Greens in relation to the Constitution Amendment Sydney Water and Hunter Water Bill 2023 and acknowledge that my colleague Tamara Smith, the member for Ballina, led for us on this and made the Greens' position in relation to both this bill and the opposition that amendment that had been foreshadowed very clear when she spoke. This bill amends the Constitution Act 1902 to insert Part 10, which ensures that the continued public ownership of Sydney Water Corporation and Hunter Water Corporation and their main undertakings remain in public ownership. It prevents any sale of a water corporation or main undertaking of a water corporation, but does not prevent a sale that would occur in the ordinary course of business of a water corporation or result in the main undertakings of the water corporation remaining in public ownership. I think it's interesting since this debate started how we have seen quite an interesting shift in the discussion. We started off, just to recall, with the new Premier Minns coming in here with the delivery of what was an election commitment to make sure that we did not see the privatisation of Sydney Water or Hunter Water in response to 12 long years of the Liberal National Coalition government doing nothing but privatising any possible thing that they could get their hands on. In fact, during my time in this place, they built whole motorway projects and managed to privatise them because they were so obsessed with the idea of privatisation. We saw an endless sell-off of public housing under these guys over here standing behind me. The only bad news that I have about the new Labor government stepping in and taking those benches is it means I have to sit over here with these guys. Now no offence to the member, no offence to certain members who just left. I made sure I did it after she'd left. The thing that I think is really critical here is that we remember that the reason we are here and the reason we are putting this in place in the Constitution is because nobody trusts the coalition government when it comes to wanting to privatise things. The Greens stand 100% in support of the new New South Wales Labor government to try and stamp out the privatisation agenda that occurred under the Liberals and Nationals. We stand here in support of this piece of legislation, and we call out the enormous levels of hypocrisy that have been happening from the now opposition benches, particularly, and can I say, I just couldn't quite believe hearing the former Nationals leader, former Deputy Premier in this place, now on the opposition benches, crying out and begging for the government to care about the public interest. Which public interest were they caring about when they were in government? Flogging off public assets, flogging off public land, flogging off and contracting it out every possible service they could think of, privatising a whole lot of areas of departments and a privatisation agenda that saw consultants, that saw individuals, that saw full, an attempt to basically, if it didn't stand still for a second, they wanted to privatise it. One of my favourites, I remember, was the then Water Minister Melinda Pavey, who was also the Housing Minister, came in here and announced the New South Wales housing strategy, and the flagship announcement was an easy-to-access website for developers to put in pictures to be able to buy off public land. This is their approach, and that here now they pretend to care about issues of privatisation. Can I just say that I have full faith in the current Water Minister, Minister Jackson, when it comes to her commitment to work collaboratively with the concerns that have been raised as a result of the wedge politics and hypocrisy that has come from the opposition in a way that will genuinely address the concerns. We'll consult with local government New South Wales, we'll consult with regional mayors. The Greens look forward to being part of any process that allows that to occur, to ensure that we are putting in place any mechanisms to ensure that we're not seeing further privatisation in this state. When it comes to those that are now sitting on the opposition benches, we know that we can never have enough scrutiny of our legislation to try and protect it in the future from the privatisation that has been inflicted on this state for the last 12 years. And so if there are additional changes that can be made, if there are additional improvements that can be made in consultation with those mayors, in consultation with the experts, in consultation with local government New South Wales and the others that have a say, then we should absolutely be doing that, and the Greens look forward to being part of that process. I want to take us back, though, to the fact that we are seeing here a real win. A win for a commitment to stand up against privatisation at the threat of both Sydney Water and Hunter Water being potentially privatised by a future government. I want to acknowledge and congratulate the Australian Services Union, who is actually my union, and the Secretary, Angus McFarlane, for all of the campaigning and the work that they did around this in the lead up to the election. As the ASU have said, a major issue for the community at the recent state election was the privatisation of public assets in New South Wales, and in particular there was a very real concern about the potential for New South Wales water assets to be further privatised, corporatised and outsourced. The ASU have made their position very, very clear, and it is the position of our community when it comes to the public interest. Not the public interest that the former Deputy Premier and former Nationals leader was talking about, not an attempt to care about public interest when it might give you a free shot in the media, but a genuine commitment to public interest. And we know that if we are privatising our essential assets, if we're privatising our public land, if we're privatising public housing and selling it off to the highest bidder at that point in time, that is a very, very, very short view of the future needs. I look in my own electorate and I see the demand right now for housing, for healthcare, for schools. We know that in the dark days of the previous Labor government that there were moves that sold off a public school in Redfern, that sold off a public hospital in Redfern. There were threats to Erskineville Public School, which is now at capacity and an amazing local public school, because when governments get an agenda and a taste for the idea of making money from privatisation, that is where we see the community interest disappear, and it is where we see private interests and private profits corrupt those in power. That is why it's so critical that we are making this change, and the Greens are absolutely supportive of seeing this change in place. I wanted to end by saying that I think that there's been a lot of talk recently in relation to the broader issue of privatisation and whether the sell-off of public land and public housing is included within a privatisation agenda. And I would urge this current New South Wales Labor government to do whatever they can to make sure that we do not sell off public land, that we do not sell off public housing, and that we don't see the idea of what is called surplus public land being used as a way to fund the building of public and social housing. It is absolutely critical that when we are taking a stance against privatisation, that we take it in all its forms, because at the end of the day, holding in perpetuity land, assets, things that are critical to making sure that we are looking after the people in this state, that means that we cannot compromise, because once we sell those off, it is so, so difficult to get them back. Not only is it costly, but the political argument to make is so strong. And so I hope that in the same commitment that we have seen this new Labor government come in here with determination to make sure that we protect the privatisation of Sydney Water and of Hunter Water in our Constitution, I hope that we see that same commitment ongoing to a commitment to not selling off any public housing or public land in our community, and we see an absolute commitment to bringing things back into public control, and we start having a conversation about getting under control some of those horrific shifts that we have seen under the last government, where it came to contracting out, to privatising and to tendering every possible thing under the sun, so that we decimate our public service and take out the expertise from our public service and the public housing, the public land and the public assets that are so critical to delivering for the people of New South Wales.